I bought my dream wardrobe, but my sister said I was trying to rub success in her face. She tried on my clothes without asking and sneered, "Guess they fit someone more deserving." I 42 female finally bought myself a beautiful, expensive wardrobe after working hard for years post-divorce. My sister Mallory 40 female stayed at my place temporarily and started wearing my clothes without asking. When I confronted her after she cooked spaghetti in my favorite dress, she accused me of trying to rub my success in her face. She made cruel comments and left without apologizing. Now, my family says I should be more sensitive, but I feel violated and disrespected. Am I missing something here? I didn't know success came with an attitude, Mallory muttered as she tugged the coat off and flung it over the arm of the couch. Guess it fits someone more deserving, anyway. I stood in the hallway of my own home, keys still in hand, grocery bags dangling at my sides. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. That coat was brand new. A splurge. Camel wool, belted, from a boutique on Madison Avenue. I'd saved for months. I hadn't even worn it outside yet. And here was my sister, stomping around the house in it like she'd paid for it herself, like I didn't even exist. Mallory was staying with me for a week. Her house in Wilkinsburg was being fumigated for termites, and the hotel the exterminator offered her wasn't kid-friendly. She asked if she and her youngest daughter, Iris, could crash at my townhouse in Squirrel Hill. I agreed without hesitation. It had been years since Mallory and I were close, but we were still sisters. Family. She'd had a tough go of things. 2 failed marriages, job instability, and 3 kids, 2 of whom lived with their dads. I figured I could at least offer her a warm bed and clean towels for a few days. In hindsight, I should have set boundaries from the beginning. The first couple of days went fine, at least on the surface. Iris was sweet, bouncy and curious, always asking questions about my houseplants or my espresso machine. She loved the little loft space upstairs and spent hours drawing on the chalkboard wall I'd installed for fun. But Mallory. She was another story. She made comments. Constantly. Passive-aggressive little observations that felt harmless at first, until they started stacking up. "Wow, someone likes neutral tones," she said the first night as she walked through my living room. "Looks like a hotel lobby in here." Or, "You must have hired someone to fold your towels like that." God, who has time for that? When I gave her the guest bathroom and mentioned the linen closet, she replied, "Jesus, do you have an actual spa in there?" By day 3, the digs became more pointed. "Some of us don't have time to prepare meals on Sundays, Claire," she said after I offered her some overnight oats I'd made for breakfast. "I barely have time to shower." I tried to brush it off. She was stressed. Single parenting isn't easy. I reminded myself of that every time she made another snide comment or rolled her eyes at something I said. But the wardrobe was where everything finally boiled over. I'd spent years rebuilding after my divorce. My ex-husband, Troy, and I had been married for almost a decade. We split when I was 34, and I spent the next 5 years barely staying afloat, freelancing, renting rooms, struggling with my credit. I remember crying in my car after a job interview because my shoes had holes in them, and I couldn't afford to replace them. But things had changed. I worked my way up in healthcare marketing. I landed a director role. I started earning real money, not just enough to get by, but enough to start planning. Saving. Investing in myself. And yes, that included finally buying the wardrobe I'd dreamed about. Tailored suits. Silk shirts. Cashmere cardigans. Comfortable but elegant flats. A proper trench coat. Pieces I could wear to conferences, dinners, work functions, or just when I wanted to feel good in my own skin. They were a symbol of something bigger, self-respect. Progress. So when I walked into my bedroom on a Thursday evening and found Mallory rifling through my closet, it felt less like an invasion and more like betrayal. She didn't even stop when she saw me. "Jesus, Claire," she said. "How much did you spend on all this crap?" I stood in the doorway, stunned. "What are you doing?" Relax, she said, slipping her arms into a silk blouse. I'm not stealing anything. Just trying them on. God, these feel ridiculous. Like wearing money. You didn't ask. Mallory turned to look at me in the mirror. You mean I need to ask permission to touch your precious things now? Yes, I said quietly. That's exactly what I mean. She stared at me, then let out a dry laugh. Right. Because now you're some kind of queen, huh? With your fancy coffee maker and designer boots and your, what, $400 shirts? They're not $400. Whatever. Close enough. This whole house is just screaming, look at me. Like, we get it. You made it out. You're doing better than the rest of us. I didn't invite you here to compare lives, Mallory, I said. I invited you here because you needed help. She didn't answer. She just slid the blouse off and tossed it on the bed, still inside out. The real blow-up came 2 days later. I was at the grocery store when Mallory texted me asking if she could use some of my frozen meatballs for dinner. I said sure. When I got back, the house smelled like garlic and onions. I assumed she was making pasta. But when I turned the corner into the kitchen, my heart sank. She was stirring sauce over the stove, wearing the dress. My emerald green wrap dress. The one I'd had tailored in New York. The one I was saving for the annual clinic gala. The one I'd kept in a garment bag because I was so afraid of anything happening to it. And there she was. Barefoot. Hair tied up. Wearing it like it was an old apron. My voice cracked. Mallory. What the hell? She looked over her shoulder. What? You're cooking in that dress. So? It's not just a dress. Oh, give me a break. Mallory, it was expensive. You didn't ask. There's marinara on the sleeve. Christ, Claire, it's not like I ruined your wedding gown or something. I told you not to touch my things. No, you implied I wasn't good enough to touch them. I just stared at her. It didn't make sense. None of this made sense. What was happening? She went on. You think because you have a fancy job and your own place and a closet full of overpriced clothes that you're better than me. But you're not. You've always looked down on me. I've never said that. You didn't have to, she said, voice rising. You let your life do the talking. I don't remember what I said next. I know my hands were shaking. I know Iris walked in at one point, wide-eyed, holding a stuffed giraffe. I know I said the words, you need to leave. And I know Mallory slammed the door so hard that a picture frame fell off the wall in the hallway. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the faint sauce stain on the dress she left draped over the arm of the couch. It wasn't even zipped. Just slouched there like a dead thing. It wasn't just about the fabric. Or the money. It was what the dress represented to me. A future I had scraped and bled for. A life I'd built thread by thread, while Mallory laughed at my routines and choices. I kept thinking back to how she used to be. When we were kids, she was magnetic. Everyone liked her more. She was prettier, more fun, carefree. I used to envy her ability to laugh at everything. But then life started handing her consequences, ones she never seemed ready for, and I watched that same carefree attitude turn into bitterness. She started interpreting other people's success as personal attacks. Like our achievements were just mirrors reflecting her failures. I made coffee at 4 a.m. and stood at the kitchen window watching the porch light buzz. She was gone by morning. She didn't say goodbye. Just left the house eerily quiet. Iris's giraffe was gone from the couch, and so were her bags. The dress, though, was still there. Slumped over the armrest like a casualty. The next few days were disorienting. I'd gotten used to the noise of a child in the house, the sound of Mallory clanking through the kitchen, her never-ending commentary. Now, it was just me and the silence. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not our brother Vaughn. Not my coworkers. I kept it to myself, because some part of me still hoped Mallory would call. Maybe say sorry. Maybe say she was overwhelmed, or that she'd been acting out of frustration. But a week passed. Then two. Nothing. When I did finally tell Vaughn, I kept it short. Just said we'd had a falling out and that she'd disrespected some boundaries. He sighed and said, Mallory's been through a lot, you know. Maybe she felt like you were rubbing your success in her face. There it was again. That same line. The thing she'd accused me of that night in the kitchen. As if owning nice things, or keeping a clean home, or being proud of your accomplishments was an attack. I didn't say anything to Vaughn in response. I couldn't even figure out how to explain it. How do you describe the sensation of someone shrinking you, just so they can feel taller? About a month after she left, a grocery bag appeared on my porch. Inside was the dress. Not cleaned. Not folded. Just balled up like a rag and stuffed next to a box of slightly used hair products and an old scarf she'd left behind. There was no note. I almost laughed at how childish it was. The quiet drama of it. She couldn't bring herself to apologize, but she wanted me to know she was done. Like dropping a mic on a stage she was never invited to. I left the bag on the porch for 2 days. Couldn't bring myself to deal with it. When I finally opened it, I noticed something small tucked inside the scarf, a bobby pin, bent and rusted. Mallory used to leave them everywhere. In couch cushions. In mugs. Under the rug in the bathroom. I always teased her about it, told her she was shedding bobby pins like a bird drops feathers. This one felt like a relic. I held it in my hand and just sat there at the kitchen counter, remembering the version of her who used to share secrets with me late at night. Who once cried on my shoulder after her first breakup. Who brought me a paper flower when I graduated from college. Where did that sister go? I didn't tell anyone about the bag. I washed the dress. The stain didn't come out completely. I folded it and put it at the back of my closet. Then, slowly, I started going through the rest of the wardrobe. Piece by piece. I tried things on in the mirror. Looked at myself objectively. Asked hard questions. Did I buy this because I love it, or because I thought I should own it to prove something? Am I dressing for confidence or for armor? I was surprised by how many pieces I didn't actually connect with anymore. A week later, I filled 3 garment bags and drove them to a women's nonprofit that helps survivors of domestic torment get back into the workforce. I didn't donate out of guilt. I donated because I'd realized what made me feel powerful wasn't the price tag on a blouse, it was the act of choosing who I wanted to be, and what I wanted to carry with me. I went back to work like nothing had happened. Attended the gala in a different dress. Talked to Vaughn on the phone occasionally, but we didn't mention Mallory. My therapist, whom I started seeing shortly after the incident, said something I keep turning over in my mind: some people can't celebrate your growth because it reminds them of where they've refused to grow. I don't know if Mallory will ever call me again. I don't know if I'd answer if she did. I haven't decided. What I do know is this: I'm not the villain in this story. And I'm not the hero either. I'm just a woman who worked hard to reclaim a life she almost lost, and who had the nerve to want something beautiful to wear while living it. I noticed something strange after Mallory left. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt bruised. It wasn't just the absence of her voice or Iris's little footsteps, it was the absence of energy, of connection, even in its most chaotic form. The house was clean again. My routines returned. I prepared meals, made my morning espresso, lit a candle in the evenings and worked through my backlog of mystery novels. But there was a tension in my shoulders that hadn't been there before. A kind of heaviness that made me second-guess everything. Did I go too far? Should I have been more patient with her? Should I have ignored the comments, let the dress thing go, and chalked it up to stress? I couldn't get her words out of my head. Someone more deserving. What did that even mean? More deserving of what? Of nice clothes? Of a quiet home? Of being proud of something I'd built for myself? I'd never flaunted my life to her. I never even talked about money unless she asked. Most of the time, I was careful not to, because I knew she was struggling. I didn't want her to feel small. But that's the thing about guilt, it seeps into cracks even when you've done everything right. 2 weeks later, our brother Vaughn invited me to lunch at a little sandwich place near the Strip District. He kept checking his phone during our meal, and eventually I asked, "Is this about her?" He didn't answer right away. Just sighed and put his phone face down. "She's not doing great," he finally said. I didn't respond. I didn't know what he wanted from me. "She said you threw her out." "She cooked in my dress, Vaughn." He raised his eyebrows. "I mean, yeah, that's not okay, but what?" I asked, sharper than I meant to be. He hesitated. "You two have always been so different. It's like oil and water. And now, with how far you've come, she probably just doesn't know how to be around you. It's like you're this mirror reflecting everything she hasn't done." "I can't apologize for doing better," I said. "I'm not saying you should." He paused. "But maybe she's not the only one who's feeling judged." I sat back in my chair. That one stung a little. I wasn't judging her. Was I? Was silently disapproving of her decisions the same thing? I thought about how I'd always told her, "You need to think about the long term," or "Why don't you take night classes?" or "You can't rely on child support forever." Maybe it sounded like advice to me, but to her, it might have felt like criticism, death by 1,000 paper cuts. Still, something inside me resisted the idea that I owed her anything more than the kindness and patience I'd already given. I opened my home. I shared my space. I didn't retaliate when she crossed boundaries. I didn't snap when she made me feel small in my own house. And still, she saw my life as a threat. It got worse when my mother found out. She called me out of the blue on a Sunday afternoon and launched into it before I could even say hello. "Your sister says you treated her like a charity case." I closed my laptop and sighed. "Mom, she's hurting, Claire. And you're not exactly giving her much compassion." I let her stay with me. I gave her food. I shared my home. And she turned around and insulted me. "Well, maybe you're too proud to see your own role in it." I felt something twist in my chest. It always came back to this. Mallory's pain was real. But mine? Mine was selfish. Cold. Dismissive. My mother had always seen Mallory as fragile. Sensitive, she called it. The kind of person who couldn't be held to the same standards as everyone else. She needed grace, space, empathy. I'd been raised on the opposite principles: be strong, be smart, be responsible. It was like we were born into the same house, but raised in two different homes. That conversation ended badly. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. I started therapy 2 months after Mallory left. I'd been meaning to start for a while, burnout from work, the constant pressure to manage everything, but her visit had cracked something open in me. My therapist, Melanie, was in her late 50s, with the kind of calm demeanor that made you feel like nothing you said could ever shock her. She asked thoughtful questions, never pushing too hard, just letting me untangle the threads at my own pace. One day, I brought up the dress. The incident. The quote. Guess it fits someone more deserving. She sat quietly for a long moment before she said, "Why did that sentence hurt so much?" I told her it was insulting. Mean. Unprovoked. But why that sentence? And suddenly, it hit me, because deep down, there was still a part of me that believed I had to earn love. That success without suffering was indulgence. That if I had nice things, someone else had to go without. That being happy while my sister struggled made me selfish. It was old wiring. Childhood wiring. Mallory was always the one in crisis. I was always the one who coped. And maybe I didn't know how to live a good life without wondering if it came at someone else's expense. But Melanie said something I'll never forget. Her reaction says more about her relationship with herself than with you. Jealousy is loudest in the rooms where self-worth is quietest. That sentence was like a warm stone in my hand. I carried it for weeks. I saw Iris again by accident. It was early spring. I was walking through Frick Park on a Sunday morning, earbuds in, latte in hand, when I heard a little voice behind me say, "Aunt Claire?" I turned around, and there she was, holding a leash with a small mutt bouncing at her feet. Mallory was a few paces behind, arms crossed. Iris ran up and hugged me without hesitation. She was taller. Her hair is longer. Her coat had a missing button. Mallory didn't come over. She stood back near a bench, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. We didn't speak. Not then. But we didn't walk away, either. Iris chatted with me for a few minutes, talking about her new school, her dog, how she missed the chalk wall in my house. She didn't ask why I hadn't visited. She didn't ask why her mom looked like she'd eaten a lemon every time my name came up. Children don't need explanations. They feel what's true. When she ran back to Mallory, I offered a polite wave. Mallory didn't return it. Just turned and walked in the other direction without a word. I stood there for a few minutes after they disappeared from view, feeling like I'd just exited a strange dream. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I felt confirmed. That was the only word for it. Mallory had made her choice, to resent me instead of reckoning with herself. And she wasn't ready to change that story. So I stopped waiting for her to. The months passed. I kept working, kept going to therapy. I hosted dinner parties with friends, traveled a bit for work, and joined a Pilates class. Life moved on, but I couldn't shake this new instinct, to stop shrinking around people who couldn't celebrate my growth. For years, I'd tried to be the bridge. The diplomat. The sister who downplayed her promotions, her vacations, her joy, just to keep the peace. But no more. It started with small things. I stopped pretending I bought my shoes on clearance when someone asked. I stopped skipping my achievements in group texts. I stopped inviting people to criticize my happiness by opening with disclaimers like, "I know this might sound braggy, but..." I simply started living without editing myself for Mallory, or anyone like her. And then came the invitation that lit the fuse. The clinic I worked for announced they'd be sponsoring a regional women's leadership summit in Philadelphia, and I was one of the featured speakers. I'd be giving a keynote about resilience, career pivots, and reclaiming your personal power after loss. The irony wasn't lost on me. I wrote my speech slowly, deliberately. With honesty. I didn't mention Mallory by name, of course not, but she was in every syllable. The woman I used to be. The woman I nearly stayed with. The sister I'd tried to protect to my own detriment. Sometimes, I wrote, the most radical act of love is allowing someone to dislike you for telling them the truth. And sometimes the greatest kindness you can give yourself is stepping out of their shadow. It was the best thing I'd ever written. When the summit finally came, I wore a custom black crepe jumpsuit. Structured, elegant, simple. No accessories. Just a silk scarf around my neck, forest green. The same shade as that dress. The audience was packed. The room was bright and expectant. And when I walked on stage, I felt 10 feet tall. I delivered the speech without a tremor in my voice. Applause thundered when I finished. A few women stood up. Some came to find me after, asking if I had a book, a blog, anything. One woman hugged me and whispered, "I think you just gave me permission to start my life over." I smiled, humbled. Proud. Then I saw her. Mallory. Standing near the back of the room, arms folded. Not clapping. Not crying. Just staring. I didn't flinch. I walked straight past her, paused as I passed, and said without turning my head, "Now it fits someone who earned it." She said nothing. Didn't follow. Didn't try to explain. And I didn't wait. I got in my car, drove back to my hotel, took a long shower, and slept like a stone. Weeks later, she sent a single text, "I didn't know you could talk like that." I replied, "You never listened." She never wrote again. Iris sent me a handmade card around Thanksgiving, a drawing of the chalkboard wall and a dog with big ears. No mention of her mom. Just, "I miss you. You're my best grown-up." I framed it and hung it next to my kitchen window. Revenge isn't always about burning bridges. Sometimes it's about building your own damn house on a hill and locking the doors to those who treated you like a doormat. It's about showing up, shining bright, and letting your success scream everything they tried to silence. And most of all, it's about doing it, not in spite of them, but without them.